Welcome to AP European History with Dr. Brovkin. Today's topic is about the Jews of Europe in 19th century. A huge topic that really encompasses all of Europe. It's not just about France or Germany or Austria-Hungary or Russia. It's about Jews everywhere, all over in Europe. So our purpose is to find out who these people are, where do they live, what do they do, what do they believe in, what are their belief systems in religion and otherwise, and what do they think of who they are, and what do the others around them think of who they are. And from there we would move on to the next subtopic, which is Zionism. What is Zionism? What kind of a movement it is, and how did it form? Where did it go? And so on and so forth. So these are a lot of questions. First question is, where do they live? The Jews in the 19th century Europe live everywhere, and we talk about almost any country, and there are Jews. But in some there's more, and in some there's less. There's less in Spain, because they were driven out of it in 1482. There are fewer there. And there are more in England, but they were driven out a couple of times there too. But there are some that did come back. So in other words, the pattern is like this. The more east of Europe you move, the more Jews there are. So there are some in England, there are some in France, there are more in Germany, and there's a whole lot more in Austria-Hungary, and a whole lot more in Russia. But if we talk about Russia, it's only in Western Russia. So in today's terms, it would be in Lithuania, which is no longer Russia, Lithuania, Belarus, very little, mostly Ukraine and Poland. So since both Ukraine and Poland were part of the Russian Empire, we talk Russia. But actually, in Russia proper, there were not so many Jews. All of them were concentrated in the western parts of the Russian Empire. So why is that the kind of why is there such a geographical spread? Well, it's simply because Austria-Hungary was the best in terms of recognition of the Jews' rights, and in Germany too, beginning with Maria Theresa and then with Frederick, and they were kind of going towards the places where they were less discriminated, given more human rights, and then they multiplied faster in the small towns that really the hard core of Jews, that are all of the Jews in today's world, come from the area that you could put a circle in a circle of Eastern Europe. That would be the countries of the Austro-Hungarian Empire plus Russian Empire, meaning Poland and Ukraine, Romania, and so forth. So that's where most of them were, and they were close to 10 million Jews in that area alone before World War I. So that's where they are. Now, what do? And it depends where. If we're talking about West European Jews in London, in Geneva, in Amsterdam, I mean, they do the banking, and that's been always like that. If we look at history, look at the Amsterdam in 18th century, the Jews are the bankers. So that's the traditional occupation. However, this is only the upper classes. The lower classes Jews are tradesmen and artisans. And so if you go to the heartland of Jews, that's Austria-Hungary and Russian Empire, they're not really well, there are bankers, like Rothschild is a great big banker, but really the vast majority of Jews are small artisans in tiny little towns that is called shtetl. And Stadt is a city in German, and shtetl means a tiny town, both in German and in Yiddish. They speak a language which is a derivative of German, which is shtetl. If you know German, it's very, very easy to understand Yiddish. If you know Yiddish, it's very easy to understand German. It's not identical, but it's based on it. However, the writing is of the Old Hebraic script. So the oral language is that of related to German, but the script is Old Hebraic script. So that's the language they speak. This is where they live. In terms of social stratification, there's a great increase in their numbers, especially in Russian Empire and Austria-Hungary, and they're doing very, very well in Austria-Hungary, and they are oppressed in the Russian Empire, as we shall speak about later. Now about the legal status of the Jews. The legal status of the Jews can be defined into exactly two parts, where they gained a lot and where they were oppressed. In terms of geography, the best possible place for Jews was Austria-Hungary. In Austria-Hungary, the Jews were free. There was no discrimination of any kind. Jews were bankers like Rothschild, Baron. He even bought himself a title of Baron. They were great scientists such as Sigmund Freud, and they were musicians. There were a whole lot of them. They reached the highest levels. There is no restriction on education. So those Jews that did get an education reached very high levels in society. The second place where there was pretty good was Germany and France. And in the French model was actually the one that defined the legal status of the Jews in the Western world, which was Napoleon Bonaparte's liberation of the Jews, which basically put the formula like this. The Jews are equal to anybody else as French citizens. They have absolutely the same legal rights as all other French citizens. However, religion is separated from the state, and it includes the Jewish religion. In other words, it's your private matter. And that means no communal organization or no representation of Jews as a class or as a social strata. And there is no separateness in terms of anything as a group. In other words, you're completely free as an individual, but there is no group representation as it was in the East. In the Ottoman Empire, there was a Jewish law that the Jews and Jews would define themselves, would be tried according to the Jewish law. No, there's one law, French law, for anybody, Jews or Muslims or Christians or anybody, one law, and it will be the one that is of the called Napoleon. However, in personal affairs, you're free to practice this and there will not be any persecution. And as you recall, of course, there was persecution before the French Revolution, and there was a huge persecution before Maria Theresa's reforms, when the Jews were accused of all kinds of horrible things. They were banned from this and that, couldn't own property. It's just like a list of all kinds of persecutions. So the French model becomes a kind of identity, very important for Jewish identity in Western Europe. In Western Europe, by Western Europe I mean Britain, France, Germany, Italy. In these countries, the Jews are French nationals, Italian nationals, British nationals, and German citizens and nationals. In other words, they have an identity and a public persona as belonging to these countries. So the French Jews are French. They are regarded like that by law, and they regard themselves, even today. When Netanyahu came to France because of some anti-Semitic things, the French Jews said, no, we are French. We're Jews in our religion, but we are French in our identity and in law. So that's the key and the most important thing that you guys have to focus and understand. In England, a Jew who is a gentleman and who is a businessman and who is a banker, he would define himself as an Englishman with Hebraic religion. That's all. Now these people believe in Anglican Church, these people believe in Catholic Church, and we believe in our Hebraic religion. So the way they define themselves is that they're different just by religion. That's very convenient also in a country like Germany, because there are people who are Lutherans, there are people who are Protestants, there are people who are Catholics, and they're all Germans, and we are also good German citizens, loyal to Germany, but we have Hebraic religion. So that's the way it would define. It is defined by nationality is the country you live on, and with language you speak, you fuse with that culture, and only in your religion you practice your traditional faith. So they're kind of a double identity, but one could be said the same thing about Catholics, who have a double identity. The Pope is in Rome and they're in Germany, and so they're good Germans, but they're Catholics. So why can't you have good Germans who are Jews? So that's the same kind of identity. Now, the legal status, of course, in France and in Germany doesn't mean that that's the way they were. Their position was actually, at the end of the 19th century, worse than it was in Austria-Hungary, where there was no persecution and they were totally equal and they could attain whatever. Particularly this goes with the two names in France. One is Boulanger. He's a kind of an anti-Semite, and he created a kind of a movement of anti-Semitism. And then the most notorious case is that of Captain Dreyfus, who was a French citizen and who was a officer in the French army, and he was wrongly accused of being a spy for the Germans. And Émile Zola wrote his famous pamphlet that's called J'accuse, and then the whole French society split up in arguing whether Dreyfus was right or wrong, whether he was guilty or not guilty. Most progressives believe that he was not. Some conservatives believe that he was. In the end, after many, many years, it was proven that he was innocent and that the real spy was Hungarian Esterházy, who was actually doing what was ascribed to Dreyfus. Dreyfus was restored, his life was ruined, but his name was restored as an honest man who was not guilty of treason. So there was this kind of latent anti-Semitism in Western Europe, especially in France and in Germany, but it was latent. In terms of law, they still were equal, and there was an officer in the French army who was a Jew. Speaking about anti-Semitism, why was there anti-Semitism, especially in Western Europe? Because it's supposed to be advanced and democratic, and it's supposed to be educated and enlightened and all that stuff. So why was there? The causes of anti-Semitism, there are books and books and books written about why there was anti-Semitism. The simple answer is that it was not, anti-Semitism was a way out of frustrations that the modernization brought. The frustrations were many, in many classes, including the working classes, including the lower classes, who needed to find somebody to blame. So Jews were a lot of times a scapegoat to blame for something that was wrong. So evils of capitalism, Marxists would say that it's the capitalist exploitation that's to blame. But for an uneducated, simple person in the neighborhood, it would be much more easy to understand if somebody said the Jews are to blame because the Jews own this and you own nothing. The Jews do this, the Jews do that. So for a kind of a common denominator for the masses, hatred of the Jews was a convenient and easily understandable accusation that did find a lot of supporters, especially in the lower classes, the petite bourgeoisie, and others like that. So basically, it's a scapegoat. It's a convenient target in these societies to blame for the frustrations and difficulties of modernization. I already spoke about Austria-Hungary and that it is Western Europe and it is free and the Jews don't feel oppressed. Why is that? It is because of the very nature of Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary does not have one nationality. Being Austro-Hungarian is not to say I'm a German or I'm a Hungarian. You could be anything. It could be Romanian, it could be Gypsy, it could be Bulgarian, it could be Serbian, it could be Croatian, it could be Slovak. In other words, that kind of a variety of nationalities made it difficult, made it easy to add one more, and Jews. So in other words, this is where the crucial difference comes, and this is what I want you to understand very well. Jews in Eastern Europe and Jews in Western Europe define themselves completely differently. Jews in Western Europe define themselves as we are French, but our religion is Hebraic. In Austria-Hungary and in the Russian Empire, as Jew is by nationality, by ethnicity. And somebody who is a Jew is because that's a nationality, like being a Romanian, a Hungarian, a German, and a Czech, and a Jew. In other words, a Jew is a people. That's the way they understood by others, and that's the way they understood by themselves. And that's a fundamental difference. So somebody who is in Austria-Hungary, and he's a Jew, you ask him, who are you? You say, I'm a Jew. But culturally, I belong to Middle Europa, which means to Middle Europe, not to Germany. He could even say more complicated. I belong, like Kafka did, I belong to Middle Europa, and then I am Jew, and I live in Czech lands, and I'm Austrian, all of the three things at the same time. So the Czechs say the great Czech writer Kafka. The Austrians say this is the great Austrian writer because he wrote in the German language, and the Jews say the great Jewish writer who lived in Bohemia and who spoke and wrote in German, Kafka. So that's basically how it is. The most important thing is that the Jews define themselves as a nation, as a nationality, like any other nationality, and that will play a huge role in the development of Jewish identity and Jewish nationality and Jewish statehood. But that, my dear boys and girls, is in the next video. Thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe to AP European History with Dr. Brovkin.